Tonight we tiptoe past velvet ropes and through shadowy marble corridors, where chandeliers flicker and the scent of wax polish lingers in the air. You duck past a hushed security guard, creep along the carved wood paneling of an old hallway, and there, just past the second bust of a long-dead duke, you spot her, a striped tabby sprawled across an official-looking document, clearly not bothered that it's meant for the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Yes, tonight you learn about the cats who worked for the British government, like, actually worked. Salaried, housed, fed on public funds, and mentioned in memos. These weren't just office pets or aristocratic indulgences, they were official employees of Parliament. And they had jobs to do. Very sharp, pointy jobs. Of course, you probably wouldn't survive this setup in real life. Not unless you had claws, night vision, and the ability to make a roomful of politicians tolerate your unapologetic disregard for their authority. But these cats did exactly that. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Midnight in Manchester? 10 p.m. in New Jersey? I always love seeing how far this sleepy little show reaches. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your stroll through Victorian London, the air thick with soot, coal smoke, and a general sense of damp discomfort. The streets are cobbled and slick, and every alleyway seems to hiss with life, small, twitchy, hungry life. Rats. Everywhere. You pass a bakery and spot two on the windowsill. By the time you reach Parliament, you've counted at least 17. Some historians say the population of rats in 19th century London may have rivaled that of people. Others argue that's a low estimate. Inside the hallowed halls of Parliament, the problem's even worse. The building is massive, ornate, and riddled with secret passageways, perfect for debates, and even better for rodents. They nibble through parchment, chew at gas lines, and pop out mid-session like they're ready to contribute to a bill. It's not just a nuisance, it's chaos. You sit in the gallery, watching a session where an MP literally swats a rat off his desk mid-argument. No one blinks. It's become normal. But beneath the surface of all this chaos is something even more dangerous: disease. Victorians don't fully understand germ theory yet, but they're beginning to suspect that having an army of fleas on feet scampering through the nation's decision-making HQ probably isn't great. And that's where the first unlikely hero strolls in, tail up and completely unimpressed by the drama. You meet her outside the Chancellor's office, curled atop a radiator like she owns the place. No one remembers exactly when she arrived. Historians still argue whether she was brought in as an experiment or just wandered in and proved herself useful. But what we do know is that she stayed. And she hunted. Relentlessly. Within weeks, the rodent sightings drop. Word spreads. Departments that once scoffed at the idea of keeping animals indoors start whispering about getting one of those Treasury cats. You can almost hear the bureaucratic gears grinding toward something remarkable: official feline employment. Now, this isn't the first time humans and cats have had a working relationship. Ancient Egyptians worshipped them. Medieval sailors brought them aboard ships for pest control. But this is new. This is modern government rolling out a policy that, in effect, reads, hire more cats. And, sure enough, they start appearing. Not dozens at first, just a slow trickle of clever tabbies and smug calicos who figure out that a government desk job, if you're a cat, basically means endless naps, warm rooms, and rodents hand-delivered by fate. You stroll past a row of filing cabinets and spot one perched like a gargoyle, eyes locked on a distant twitch beneath the floorboards. No one interrupts her. She is, after all, on the clock. The most delightful part. These cats aren't just tolerated, they're respected. A clerk you pass refers to one by name, Wilberforce. He's a legend in the Treasury building. Supposedly caught over 100 mice in his first year and once growled at a visiting ambassador. You hear murmurs of others too: Peter, Snowball, Gladstone. Names etched quietly into office folklore. Some departments even allocate funds for their care. You sneak a peek at one such budget. There it is, clear as day: annual allowance for sustenance of official mouser. Some lines list chicken bones and sardines. One memo debates whether salmon is an acceptable use of taxpayer money. Another insists on only boiled meats, no gravies. Of course, it's not all smooth purring. Not everyone's thrilled about sharing their workspace with a predator. One stern-looking MP mutters about allergies. Another files a formal complaint after a particularly smug cat walks across his lap during committee. But those complaints rarely go far. Because the cats are effective. The rats are running scared. And more importantly, whisper it, people kind of love them. There's a quiet companionship in the way these animals wander through corridors where decisions that shape nations are made. They are, in many ways, the opposite of Parliament: silent, decisive, incapable of spin. And so, as you settle in on a padded bench beneath a giant oil painting of someone with too many buttons on their coat, a cat hops up beside you. She stretches, yawns, and curls up like you're just another piece of furniture. You don't mind. Because tonight, you're sharing your seat with a civil servant. You wake, or maybe you never quite fell asleep. In that narrow bench beneath the oil painting, a faint draft swirling around your ankles. The tabby is gone, replaced by a hollow stillness, the kind you only get in buildings that are both heavily guarded and very old. Somewhere down the hall, the creak of boots and a flick of candlelight mark the night watch making rounds. But you're already drifting forward in time, deeper into the 1800s, and the rodents. They are multiplying faster than government paperwork. London's rat population is becoming more than just an annoyance, it's practically a parallel society. The Victorians may have conquered half the globe, but back home, they are losing an epic turf war to 4-ounce rodents. You step outside Westminster for a moment and take a walk through the city. Everywhere you look, gnawed carriage wheels, shredded paperboard sacks, and grimy corners with tiny eyes blinking back at you. See, London in the 19th century isn't exactly the sanitary jewel of the empire. Sewer systems are only just catching up to population booms. Garbage collection is, well, casual at best. And food waste is basically an open buffet for anything with whiskers and teeth. Add in the warm nooks of old buildings and suddenly, rats aren't pests anymore, they're roommates. Victorian newspapers begin to sound the alarm. Editorials describe public offices overrun, desks nibbled to splinters, and one particularly dramatic letter to the Times blames the loss of an important naval dispatch on rat sabotage. Okay, that may be a stretch, but one thing's clear: the situation's bad enough to prompt Parliament to do something, a sentence that always takes a bit longer to fulfill than you'd hope. Their first move: human exterminators. You step back inside and spot one of these early rat catchers, tall, gaunt, and carrying a heavy sack that twitches slightly at the bottom. He smells like pipe smoke and despair. These men, often freelance and underpaid, are hired by the pound. 1 rat equals 1 shilling. At first, it seems promising. They roam the halls, set traps, carry out squealing sacks, and collect their earnings. Parliament pats itself on the back. And then the unintended consequences roll in. Turns out, paying per rat encourages creative accounting. Some exterminators allegedly bring their own rats, releasing them near the cellar so they can catch them later. Others become so familiar with the mice in certain rooms that they begin naming them. Productivity declines. The rats return. One bold rodent reportedly nibbles on the Prime Minister's lunch tray. He is not amused. Historians still argue whether this corruption among rat catchers was widespread or just a few bad apples with very large bags, But one fact remains: human solutions were falling apart faster than the baseboards. Something else was needed. Something faster. Something sneakier. Something with whiskers. Enter the cats. You're standing just outside the Chancellor's office again, watching a somewhat nervous clerk carry a tiny kitten wrapped in an old government memo. She's the first one brought in intentionally, not a stray who wandered in, but a handpicked mouser. She's got little white socks and a stare that says, "I do not care who voted for what." Her paws hit the marble floor with quiet resolve, and that's the moment something changes. She doesn't just catch mice. She scares them. Her scent alone sends them scrambling. And unlike rat catchers, she doesn't expect a paycheck, just a bowl of milk and a sunny window. Honestly, her work ethic puts half the staff to shame. You follow her through her first week. It's impressive. Every day, a new carcass is placed delicately, like an offering, near the door to the accounts office. Staff morale spikes. Complaints about rustling under desks drop by half. And someone even pens a thank you note addressed to the cat. Soon, other departments are whispering, "Can we get one too? Is she unionized? Do we have to share?" And just like that, Parliament quietly begins the most low-key hiring spree in its history. Cats begin appearing one by one. They're chosen for temperament, not too aloof, agility, bonus points if they can scale a drapery, and, let's be honest, charm. No one wants to feed a grump. You pause by a window ledge and watch two newcomers sizing each other up. One gives a half-hearted hiss before deciding it's too much effort. Clearly, turf politics are already underway. Their arrival isn't formalized yet. But the whispers spread beyond Parliament. Other government buildings start to take notice. The Post Office. The Foreign Office. Even the Bank of England. It becomes a sort of trend, a nod to practicality cloaked in adorable efficiency. One MP jokes that the cats are the only staff who don't talk back. Another suggests they attend committee meetings, as they seem to have more sense than some of the members. The joke lands surprisingly well. But not everyone's on board. You catch a heated side conversation in the library, an older official grumbling about fur on the upholstery. "It's undignified," he mutters. "We're the cradle of democracy, not a blasted petting zoo." His colleague replies, deadpan, "Would you prefer the rats?" Still, the debate persists. Are these cats a temporary fix or a permanent feature? Should they be given names? What about wages? Can one deduct a scratching post from official expenses? Historians still argue whether the earliest cat budgets were drawn from general maintenance or quietly tucked under miscellaneous costs. What's undeniable is that the feline presence is reshaping life in Westminster. Mice are no longer the uncontested kings of the underfloor. Paper stacks last longer. Sandwiches go uneaten, by rodents, anyway. And as you settle again on your bench, warm from the radiator and the quiet comfort of bureaucratic absurdity, a ginger tomcat slinks across the far corridor. He pauses, glances at you like he knows you're an outsider, and vanishes into the dark. Just another civil servant, clocking in. You wander deeper into the belly of the building, your footsteps muffled by threadbare carpets and time itself. Somewhere overhead, the rain begins its polite British tapping against leaded glass. You glance left, there's a reading room. You glance right, oh, that's a rodent again. But this time, something's off. There's no chase, no drama, no scramble. The rat looks around, and there's no one to fear. Because for once, the predators are on break. See, it wasn't all smooth sailing once the feline cavalry arrived. Not every cat lived up to their promise. Some were shy. Others were lazy. One famously refused to chase mice altogether and instead developed an obsession with ribbon, specifically the kind used to tie up parliamentary correspondence. Cute. Yes. Useful. Debatable. And this, dear listener, is where the great human rat catchers made their final, flamboyant play. It's now the mid-1800s, and public opinion toward human rat exterminators is wobbling. Cats are winning hearts. But the professional mousermen aren't giving up without a hiss of their own. One notorious crew even stages a rat demonstration outside Parliament, letting loose a crate of captured rodents to prove the scale of the problem and then heroically chasing them down in front of journalists. Historians still argue whether the whole event was orchestrated for publicity or genuine pest panic. You can imagine the scene. Parliament officials screaming, reporters scribbling, and a dozen rats running amok across Westminster's manicured lawn. Somewhere, a marmalade cat watches from a windowsill, unimpressed. Back inside, the bureaucracy creaks in confusion. Memos are flying. One department insists the cats are underperforming. Another argues they are indispensable. A third, clearly over this entire drama, suggests we just try snakes. That memo does not go far. Eventually, the truth lands with a gentle thud, like a sleeping tabby on a stack of parliamentary reports. Cats are better. Or at least, they don't scam the system and they don't unionize. Probably. But here's the thing, cats still weren't enough. Not yet. For every diligent mouser, there was a sleepy floof curled beneath a radiator, doing precisely nothing. Some cats were brilliant, legendary, even, but others treated rodent control like a soft suggestion. One feline, known as Marmaduke, became infamous not for catching mice, but for stealing sandwiches out of junior clerks' coat pockets. Another, Princess Henrietta, yes, someone named her that, demanded fresh milk and rejected any meat not served on porcelain. So the Parliament, in its infinite wisdom, tried to standardize the system. That's right, they created what could be generously described as performance reviews. You find an old memo in the archives that reads, "Cat in room 217 appears lazy. Staff report 0 mice caught this quarter." Another states, "Mouse remains found near fireplace, attributed to Gladstone. Bonus sardines approved." You can't make this up. But they did. Still, not all cats agreed to these informal KPIs. Some simply vanished. Others refused to perform under observation, probably due to principle, or maybe just because that's what cats do. One particularly rebellious tabby named Bellamy was reportedly let go after he was caught napping in the ceremonial mace cabinet. Twice. Still, staff begged for him to stay. They said he had great vibes. Bureaucracy, however, does not grade on vibes. With growing inconsistency in cat performance, a brief proposal surfaces: bring back human exterminators to complement the cats. For a short while, both systems run side by side, like rival sports teams sharing a locker room. You pass through a hallway where a rat catcher with a net scowls at a tortoiseshell stretching luxuriously across a ledge. She blinks. He mutters. It's tense. Eventually, the cats win. Again. Because the public loves them. The newspapers love them. Even some MPs begrudgingly love them. One representative, caught sneaking sausage bits under his desk to feed a resident mouser, simply shrugged and said, "He's more loyal than half the cabinet." There's a sort of cat-shaped inevitability forming now. New staff are briefed about the feline employees. Posters quietly go up advising people not to feed them too much, ignored. Maintenance logs begin including things like check radiator vent in room 104, cat stuck again. It's happening. Parliament is becoming a shared workplace. But let's not forget, the cats had help. There were always cat people behind the scenes. Junior clerks, typists, even ministers who secretly adored them. You find a hidden drawer in the archives filled with handmade collars, tiny knitted scarves, and one miniature top hat labeled "For Peter," if he sits still. And then there's the great scandal of 1879. You're in the records room, nose deep in old documents, when you come across a deeply buried file labeled Mouser misconduct. Yes, seriously. Turns out, one of the Treasury cats was accused of sabotaging a vote. Here's what allegedly happened. A key official arrives late to a budget discussion. His excuse: "I was locked in the cloakroom with that blasted cat." Whether this was a fluke or a feline conspiracy remains unclear, but the fallout was real. For a week, debate raged on whether cats could be considered politically disruptive agents. The cat in question was quietly reassigned to a less sensitive hallway. It's at this point that you realize something peculiar. This is no longer a pest control solution. This is culture. This is law. The cats have become part of the story, not just background noise. They have names, quirks, enemies, defenders. They have their own political capital. You watch a tuxedo cat leap from a filing cabinet to a bookcase and knock off a dusty tome. A nearby clerk glances over and mutters, "Right on schedule," like it's all part of the day. Because now, it is. So you take a seat in the Commons chamber, empty for now, dimly lit. The chairs creak. The air smells of musty velvet and floor polish. And there, at the speaker's podium, a small black cat curls up and begins to purr. No debate. No vote. Just a soft hum that says, "Parliament belongs to everyone." You stretch out on the worn velvet bench, your fingers tracing the frayed edge of a cushion that's seen more whispers than war. Footsteps echo distantly, the occasional clatter of a cleaning bucket or a sighing porter padding across the marbled floors. But it's not them you're waiting for. It's him. The first big name. The feline who goes from whisper to record, from stray to staff. He arrives on a damp Tuesday in 1929, though his paw prints go further back. His name is Peter. Peter the cat. Later known as Peter the Lord's cat, which, let's be honest, sounds like he has his own seat in the House of Lords. And maybe he does, informally. You certainly wouldn't put it past him. Peter is no ordinary mouser. His Parliament's first officially recognized feline employee. Not just tolerated. Not just named. Employed. With a budget line and everything. Historians argue whether he was truly the first, or just the first to make it into government papers, but either way, Peter's the real beginning of the bureaucracy meets whiskers love affair. You watch him emerge one early morning, his black fur slick with fog, as he saunters into the Treasury building like he's late for a breakfast meeting. Someone holds the door for him. Someone else whispers, "Good lad." He doesn't meow. He doesn't need to. His job. Rodent control, of course. But unofficially. Moral support, stress relief, and, by all accounts, occasional document supervisor. You step into the Chancellor's office and find Peter sprawled across an inkwell-stained blotter, one paw pressed lightly against a stack of urgent memos. He's reviewing them. Or he's asleep. Maybe both. His reputation grows quickly. By 1930, Peter is referred to in official records as the Treasury cat. He is allocated a modest annual allowance, 1 penny a day, for food. That doesn't sound like much until you remember, this is a time when many humans weren't getting daily allowances of anything. Peter gets beef scraps and milk. On cold days, a foot warmer. On especially good days, a saucer of something stronger, depending on who's around. The public adores him. Journalists start including little asides in political columns. Peter observed today's budget announcement with indifference. A famous photo shows him perched near a radiator while two ministers argue about tariffs. You can't help but notice who looks more composed. Now, of course, not everyone is thrilled about a cat being paid to nap and occasionally murder rodents. Some newspapers call it a frivolous waste of taxpayer money. One indignant letter to the editor asks, if cats now draw salaries, should we expect them to vote next? Peter doesn't reply. He's too busy sunbathing on the roof. Still, His legacy is more than naps and nibbling mice. His proof that bureaucracy can bend just a little. That a system known for suits and red tape can make room for something soft, four-legged, and profoundly uninterested in status. You hear murmurs of how Peter once thwarted a visiting dog from a foreign diplomat. That he stared down an overzealous clerk who tried to boot him from a windowsill. There's even a story, possibly apocryphal, of him quietly entering a press conference and sitting directly on the microphone, which may explain why the recording ends abruptly with static and muffled purring. But the most curious file you uncover is this, an internal memo from 1933 marked regarding Peter's health. In it, staff note that he seems tired, less active, not himself. The language is careful, almost reverent. They recommend a softer diet, fewer visitors, and a warmer blanket near his usual radiator. No one uses the word retirement, but you can feel it in the lines. He passes quietly not long after. There's no statue, no formal ceremony, but someone places a white flower on the windowsill where he always sat a day. A few days later, a small plaque appears in the break room. Peter the Treasury cat, faithful mouser, 1929 to 1941. It is crooked. No one straightens it. That feels right. And just like that, a precedent is born. You see, Peter's not the first cat to live in Parliament. But he's the first cat to become a standard. After him, departments begin requesting feline staff more openly. Memos are circulated. Budgets drafted. One senior administrator even proposes a feline placement coordinator. The motion is shelved, but the intent is there. Each new cat gets a name, a post, a fond nickname whispered among staff. There's Humphrey, who later earns national fame. There's Wilberforce, with a swish of his tail and a nose for headlines. But none of them walk quite like Peter. He is the ghost in the corridors, the founding paw print. And more cats are on their way. You catch sight of them in different corners of Parliament. Some elegant and sleek, others round and grumpy. One ginger bruiser has a scar across his nose and a fondness for backstairs chicken bones. They each bring something different, but none would have a job, a food budget, or an official government file if not for Peter, the Lord's cat. Even today, decades later, there's a sense that somewhere in the rafters, he's still watching. That any mouser stepping paw into Parliament is, whether they know it or not, walking in Peter's shadow. You lean back against the wall as the corridor dims with dusk. The gaslights hum. And from down the hall, you hear the soft, unmistakable thump of paws hitting carpet. Another civil servant, reporting for duty. Following in legendary footsteps. The hallway you're wandering now has a hum to it, not the buzzing electricity kind, but the low, muttering kind. Disagreements behind doors. Shuffling paper. The clink of teacups. And under it all, the faintest crunch of kibble being devoured in a side office labeled staff only. Guess who's in there? Hint, not a staffer. Yes, tonight you finally witness one of the strangest, most absurdly charming bureaucratic tangles in the history of feline employment, the debate over feeding the workforce. Not the human one. The cats. You pause beside a wall sconce and listen as two civil servants argue in hushed tones. She prefers boiled cod. Cod is 2 shillings a pound. She's doing important work. She's a cat. She caught 4 mice last week. Did anyone see that? Or are we just trusting her? This isn't just idle chatter. You follow them into a meeting room, where, laid out across a table usually reserved for tax audits and post-war planning, is a ledger. A real, bound, leather-creased book titled Mouser Rations and Expenses. Inside, receipts. Dozens of them. Itemized. Boiled chicken, soft beef scraps. A side note about liver rejected, will not touch. You trace the ink with your finger and realize this wasn't an occasional indulgence. Parliament budgeted for cat food. Formally. They even haggled over brands. Historians still argue whether a 1940s switch from fresh meats to canned food triggered a temporary decline in feline performance. And it wasn't just food. A note from 1952 mentions a junior official requesting approval for 2 small woolen blankets and a set of ceramic bowls. The response? Approved. On the condition the bowls are not engraved. One anonymous clerk, bless them, writes a passionate 6-page memo defending a proposed increase in the cat food allowance. Their argument? Inflation. And feline dignity. They quote Peter's legacy, cite mouse capture statistics, and end with, "It is unwise to insult those who patrol the wires behind our cabinets." You love them instantly. Not everyone agrees, of course. You flip through records of repeated pushback. A grumpy note from a finance officer states, if the cats want perks, let them join the civil service pension scheme. Another, probably after stepping in something, grumbles, we spend more feeding that cat than we do on coffee for the interns. Which is kind of telling, actually. Still, cat defenders remain loyal. Someone pens a poem titled Ode to Wilberforce Dinner, left anonymously in the tea room. It ends with, may no mouse nest where thy paw hath trod, but may thy bowl always overflow with lightly salted fish, not cod. It's framed. It's still there. But the feeding debate doesn't stop at budget. Oh no. It turns personal. One internal squabble from 1964 nearly derails an entire supply order after someone insists sardines must be served in water, not oil. Another department threatens to withdraw their mouser after rumors swirl that a rival team snuck ham to their cat in a blatant attempt at poaching. The feline kind, not the egg kind. And then comes the glorious scandal of 1978, the sausage incident. Here's what happened. A beloved ginger cat named Montague, stationed near the House of Lords, begins showing signs of plumpness. Not adorable cat chunkiness, serious, waddling, I sleep on documents because I can't jump kind of plumpness. His supervisor, yes, he has one, investigates. Turns out, Montague has been receiving sausage links. Not once. Not twice. Daily. From whom? A retired peer known for sharing bits of his lunch. No big deal, right? Except Montague now refuses kibble entirely and growls if offered anything that isn't seasoned pork. An inquiry is launched. Letters are exchanged. The peer, when questioned, simply shrugs and says, he asked politely. Montague is put on a supervised diet. For 2 weeks. Then someone caves, and the sausages resume, quietly. He lives another 7 years and is later buried with, reportedly, a tiny sausage replica placed next to his grave marker. You tell yourself you're not crying. Just very moved by the fiscal mismanagement of adorable things. But let's zoom back a bit. Behind the hilarity is something rather profound. These feeding logs, budget debates, and little turf wars say something real. The cats are family. Not just mouses. Not novelties. Colleagues. You stand in a break room and hear someone casually ask, has Snowball eaten today, as if discussing the Postmaster General. And Parliament acts on it. They schedule feeding rotas. Designate cat duty to junior staffers. A handwritten chart from the 1980s includes tick boxes for food, water, and pet behind ears. You're not sure if the last one's official or just spiritually mandatory. One particularly dedicated official creates a full dossier titled Mouser Meal Preferences, 1975 to 1986. It reads like an elite restaurant menu crossed with a therapist's case file. Eventually, some departments try to streamline things. The Treasury experiments with timed feeding stations. The post office installs a mouser kitchen, a glorified broom closet with a microwave and labeled bowls. One department holds a vote on switching to dried food for consistency. It fails. Miserably. The cats win again. And here's a little-known tidbit. At least one feline is believed to have influenced food policy decisions beyond their own dinner bowl. A memo from 1991 refers to a test batch of biodegradable packaging, introduced because a cat kept tearing into the old ones and making a mess. The trial was so successful it was later adopted more broadly across government supply. So yes, they may not hold elected office. But they do hold sway. As you walk back down the corridor, past the dining records and still-curled post-it notes reading "Do not feed on a diet," you spot a ginger tail slipping around a corner. You follow. She stops beside a bowl, looks up at you, and gives a slow, calculated blink. You reach out to top off the kibble. She sniffs. Turns her nose up. You should have gone with boiled chicken. You tiptoe through a barely lit hallway now, the kind with too many doorways and not enough light bulbs, where the carpets always feel like they've just been vacuumed, because they haven't. You pass portraits of grim statesmen and half-forgotten barons. Most look like they'd faint if you told them their office would one day be co-occupied by a four-legged, tuna-scented anarchist. But tonight, we peer beyond policy and paperwork into something richer, the secret lives of government cats. Because as buttoned up as Parliament may seem, after the lights go down and the human voices hush, something else stirs in these ancient halls. Something soft-pored, secretive, and entirely uninterested in protocol. You're sitting in the corner of a dusty reading room when you spot it, a flicker of movement across the floorboards. Not a rat, don't worry. It's a sleek black cat, cutting across the shadows like a knife through butter. No collar. No jingle. Just eyes like marbles and a mission unknown to anyone but her. By day, she's known as Minerva, unofficially stationed near the House of Lords. By night, she's everywhere. Down in the archives, scaling the roof beams, slipping through doors someone swore were locked. She has access to rooms entire security teams can't figure out how she entered. One archivist swears she once found Minerva inside a locked document cabinet, curled up on a 17th-century naval treaty. Historians still argue whether this was a fluke of hinges, a distraction during filing, or Minerva simply phasing through matter. You lean toward magic. These cats, once clocked out, come to life in ways no employee handbook could ever capture. There's Peter 3, infamous for patrolling the corridors between 2 and 4 a.m., pausing outside certain offices with unnerving regularity. Staff joked he was spying. Others weren't so sure. You follow his trail through a moonlit hallway, past thick oak doors and green carpet. Suddenly, he stops. Sits. Stares at a blank wall. 4:15 full minutes. No motion, no sound. Then he walks away like that's all you needed to know. What did he see? No one ever figured it out. A few superstitious MPs suggested ghosts. Others said Peter had uncanny instincts about when not to enter a room, specifically when confidential meetings were happening. The same rooms, by the way, that leaked mysteriously soon after. Coincidence? Probably. Definitely. Maybe. But these cats don't just patrol. They socialize. With each other. And with, well, you wouldn't call it a formal hierarchy, but there's something happening. You pass through a maintenance stairwell one night and see 3 cats sitting together, 2 tabbies and a black and white bruiser, each facing a different direction like some feline Illuminati summit. They don't move. They don't blink. You back away slowly. And then there's the tale of Matilda and the midnight fire drill. It's 1985. Matilda, a fluffy grey longhair, is considered charming but generally useless, prefers napping in boxes to catching anything. One night, the alarms blare. Fire crews are dispatched. Staff gather on the lawn in various states of confusion and robe-wearing. And then someone notices Matilda, cool as a cucumber, leading 2 kittens down the grand staircase, her tail held high. Turns out she had a litter in the basement. The alarms were false, but Matilda's calm evacuation of her young becomes something of a legend. She's referred to afterward as the emergency coordinator, and some say she even received an unofficial commendation. You find no record of this, of course. Just a torn envelope labeled "For Matilda, chicken treats only." The cats also interact with the building in strangely consistent ways. A cabinet in room 14B is known to always attract napping. No one knows why. The air vent outside the library, permanent gathering spot, especially during debates on education funding. A specific worn section of carpet near the Foreign Office gets daily face rubs from every mouser who passes. Tradition? Secret message board? Olfactory time capsule? We may never know. But perhaps the most curious chapter in the unofficial feline files is what the staff call the red dot affair. It begins with a laser pointer. Obviously. Some mischievous aide brings one in during a particularly dry legislative week and flashes it across a hallway wall near the canteen. What starts as a harmless moment of fun becomes a full-blown turf dispute between two cats, Eleanor and Biscuit, who both insist on ownership of the mysterious light. For days, they chase it. Snarl at each other. Knock over umbrellas. Staff start placing bets. Someone draws a cartoon strip about it in the break room. Then, just as quickly as it began, it stops. The aide responsible is reassigned. Eleanor moves to the 3rd floor. Biscuit vanishes for a week, then returns with a smug expression and a slightly singed tail. You don't ask questions. Quirky? Sure. But it's more than that. These moments, these little dramas, are the soul of the place. And while the humans file, vote, and draft policy, the cats shape the emotional weather. Their patterns and moods ripple through the building. One mouse's illness can send an entire hallway into gloom. A surprise kitten appearance sparks days of whispered joy. Of course, there are those who take it too far. You find a logbook from the 1970s with a whole page dedicated to cat astrology. Some staff member, a bored intern, maybe, began tracking mouser behavior against the phases of the moon and Mercury retrogrades. There's an actual table cross-referencing lunar cycles with productivity. Oddly enough, during one particular full moon, 6 mice were caught in 24 hours. Probably nothing. Probably. Now, as you settle near a radiator with a drafty window and a strong scent of musty toast, a cat hops up beside you. She doesn't look at you. She just purrs. Like she knows what you've been hearing. Like she's part of the secret you've started to unravel. And maybe, just maybe, if you sit very still and blink very slowly, she'll let you in on tonight's agenda. It's probably mice. But it might be something more. The radiator hums behind your back, casting warm ripples through the otherwise chilly air. You sit quietly, half drowsy now, watching a flick of a tail disappear around the bend. She'll be back. Or she won't. Either way, you're starting to understand, these cats don't just haunt the halls of Parliament. They live here. And the people who live here too, day after day, year after year, well, they've started to care. Maybe too much. Because tonight you walk straight into the softer underbelly of Westminster life, the emotional bonds between humans and their feline co-workers. And you quickly discover that for many of the staff, it's not just about rodent control anymore. It's about companionship. About a soft face rubbing against your ankle after a 16-hour shift. About purring filling a corridor where most people only sigh. You first see it at the security desk, where a large tabby named Cedric sprawls across the sign-in log. The guard doesn't move him. Instead, she gently lifts the edge of the book, writes around his belly, and whispers, "Good lad, Cedric." She's not joking. Cedric has sat there every morning for 3 years. He's part of the routine. He's clocked in. Further down, you pass a clerk, middle-aged, slightly flustered, ink on his sleeve, pausing in a stairwell to fish a sardine tin from his satchel. He opens it with the kind of reverence normally reserved for religious rites, sets it down, and waits. No one else is around. Except the tuxedo cat already sitting by the bottom step, tail politely curled. "Morning, Minister Pickle," the clerk says. You almost laugh. But then you realize he's dead serious. And so is Minister Pickle, who eats with the delicacy of a true public servant. There's a reason for this connection. Parliament is not just a building. It's a pressure cooker. Long hours. Endless paperwork. Never-ending debates about taxes, war, education, and whether or not sandwiches should be allowed in the committee rooms. They should, by the way, strong feelings on that. And in the middle of it all, a cat pads silently through the storm, entirely unaffected. It's no wonder civil servants, especially the ones buried deep in logistics and legwork, start to grow attached. You find a note scrawled in a ledger, clearly added by hand. "Please feed Tabby on Tuesdays, she gets moody if ignored." Official? No. Enforced? Absolutely. And this isn't a modern fluke. You discover journal entries from as far back as the 1890s, written by assistants and scribes, describing a little ginger fellow who follows me down the hall and naps on my inkwell. Another entry simply reads, "Mouser absent today. Felt a bit colder somehow." Some cats are drawn to specific people. One mouser named Ernest famously followed a single clerk between buildings every day for 5 years. When the clerk retired, Ernest refused to return to his former haunt. Instead, he staked out a windowsill near the exit where the man had last been seen. A small plaque eventually appeared on the windowsill. "Ernest waits." That one sticks with you. Then there's the story of Florence, a tortoiseshell who lived in the House of Lords archive room in the 1950s. An archivist named Mabel, widowed, quiet, notoriously precise, would sit for hours organizing ledgers while Florence slept in her lap. Over time, Mabel began keeping a daily log of Florence's moods. You find excerpts in the archive. Monday, purring, but tail twitchy. Avoided biscuits. Thursday, very sleepy. Refused to acknowledge Lord Gratham's speech. Sunday, rainy. We napped. Somewhere in those inked lines, you realize Mabel had stopped recording a cat. She was recording her friend. Florence lived to the age of 16. The archive hosted a private memorial. A bouquet was placed next to the Dewey Decimal cards. Mabel wore black. And don't think the attachment stops with the support staff. Oh no. Ministers get pulled in too. One tale, whispered more than written, involves a particularly stern MP during the Thatcher years who was seen cooing to a scrawny stray that had wandered into the lounge. He fed it bacon. When questioned, he simply grunted, "It understands me better than half my colleagues." The cat was later named Neville. The nickname stuck. There's something healing about their presence. A purring lump on your notes. A blink of calm amid policy storms. One overworked aide admitted in a letter home that he only made it through budget season thanks to the calming presence of Millie, a grey cat with a habit of kneading shoulders mid-memo. Of course, not all bonds are simple. Some become intense. You find evidence of turf wars, not between cats, but between humans. One memo from 1988 details a squabble between two offices over who rightfully hosts Oliver. The arguments include feeding history, nap regularity, and even a time-stamped photograph labeled proof. He sat on my desk first. Management had to intervene. The solution? Oliver got 2 beds, 2 bowls, and reportedly a bit of an attitude. Another story involves a rivalry between a typist and a policy assistant over access to a black and white kitten. The typist started baking cat treats. The assistant ordered toys from France. The kitten allegedly developed a superiority complex and began sleeping on neither of their desks, instead choosing a random windowsill and ignoring both. Power move. And it all circles back to this strange truth. These cats, in their sleepy, aloof yet secretly clingy way, offer something rare in a place obsessed with power and rules. They offer presence. They don't care about protocol. They don't chase promotions. They don't argue, file paperwork, or storm out of meetings. They just are. And sometimes, that's all people really need. You sit now in the tea room. It's late. The lights are dimmed. Someone's left a half-drunk cup of chamomile beside a biscuit no one will eat. And across the room, stretched lazily across a radiator, is a tabby who blinks slowly when you look at her. She doesn't move. But you feel better just knowing she's there. You're halfway through your walk now, though it doesn't feel like walking anymore. It's more like gliding, floating from one hushed corridor to the next, eavesdropping on a world so quietly ridiculous it could only exist inside British bureaucracy. The cats, as you've come to accept, have their paws in everything. And sometimes, bless their little pink toe beans, they cause complete and glorious chaos. You slip through a side entrance into a polished committee room. Velvet chairs. Ornate wallpaper. A mahogany table that's probably seen more lies than your average poker night. It all looks very proper until you spot the suspiciously dark stain on the polished floorboards. The Great Incident of 1923. Historians still argue whether it was a genuine accident or a petty act of feline protest. What we do know is this: a ginger tabby named Edgar, officially employed as chief mouser to the Ministry of Works, had, shall we say, a digestive emergency. Right on the floor. Right before a key vote on government spending. The timing was exquisite. 3 members slipped. 1 reportedly wept. The smell, described in an internal memo as wholly unbefitting of Her Majesty's Parliament. The vote was delayed for 2 hours while the room was evacuated and fumigated with something floral and suspiciously ineffective. Some say the smell lingered for weeks. Edgar, unbothered, was later found sunbathing near the House of Lords as if he'd saved the kingdom. From that day forward, a janitor was unofficially designated Cat Emergency Response Officer, and the budget for carpet cleaning quietly tripled. But feline disruption doesn't always come from the front end, so to speak. Sometimes it's the absence of a cat that causes the greatest stir. Take the case of Marmalade. Yes, that was his real, documented name, who mysteriously disappeared the night before the Treasury's annual report. Marmalade had been the darling of the upper floor, often seen perched like a gargoyle on ledges during long drafting sessions. Then, poof, gone. Posters were made. A bell-ringing session was held. One anxious junior clerk combed the entire building with a tin of sardines, muttering "Marmy, please" under his breath like a defeated wizard. The report was late. Not because Marmalade did anything, but because his absence plunged morale into a deep, philosophical despair. "The numbers feel cruel without him," someone allegedly said. And then, just as mysteriously, Marmalade returned. On top of a filing cabinet in the Chancellor's office. No explanation. No fanfare. Just a yawn and a single poor lick. That same week, a diplomatic courier went missing for several hours in the same wing. Coincidence? Of course. Probably. Sometimes, though, the disruptions are strategic. Consider Matty, a lean black cat employed, or tolerated, by the Department of Agriculture. Known for being unusually territorial and possessing what staff described as a vindictive tail flick, Matty once locked an entire staff of 8 inside their conference room. Here's how it happened. The old door latch, brittle with age and bureaucracy, could be jammed if someone leaned against it from the outside. Guess who decided to nap against that door during an extended policy review? Matty. And guess who didn't move for 4 hours, despite pounding, shouting, and even a desperate bribe of tuna slid under the frame? Also Matty. They missed 2 meetings. Matty, however, got a full nap. But not all chaos is petty. Sometimes, cats wield power. Real power. You come across an archived set of letters between two senior MPs in the 1940s, handwritten, furious, barely legible, and all about the custody of a cat named Prudence. Prudence had been dividing her time between two offices, each claiming she preferred them. When one MP transferred her food bowl to his side of the corridor, the other responded by redirecting her litter tray with a strongly worded memo attached. This spiraled into a standoff. 2 weeks later, their departments refused to cooperate on a bill until Prudence was returned to neutral ground. A compromise was eventually reached: a shared lounge, 3 feedings a day, and a rotating nap schedule. The bill passed. Prudence got a personalized cushion. Historians still debate whether the whole thing was theatre, or if this cat truly held parliamentary peace in her velvet-padded paws. Of course, public opinion couldn't be kept out of it. You see, the press caught wind. And if you think modern media is obsessed with cats, try Victorian-era tabloids. A single blurry sketch of a mouser sitting on a dispatch box could land front-page headlines. One particularly sassy column titled Fur and Faction documented the daily movements of cats in and around Parliament as if they were minor royalty. They even ran a gossip column about a pair of courting mousers who frequented the Rose Garden and ignored all parties but each other. But scandals weren't just imagined. One particularly hushed-up affair involved a mouser nicknamed Spats, who had an unbreakable habit of climbing inside briefcases. Not just any briefcases, ministerial ones. One day, Spat's curiosity got the better of him and he accidentally shredded a confidential budget proposal with his claws and teeth. It took a week to reassemble the fragments. When asked how it happened, the minister replied, stone-faced, "I left it on the radiator." Spats was cold. No reprimand followed. But the minister's future briefcases were reportedly sprayed with lemon oil. Cats hate citrus, after all. You shake your head, smiling. These moments may sound absurd. And they are. Deliciously so. But they matter, because in a place built on hierarchy, order, and formality, the cats represent the great equalizer. They cannot be bribed. Cannot be impressed. And they certainly won't wait to use the litter tray just because someone's giving a speech. They are the mess inside the machine. The delightful disruption. The proof that even in the most buttoned-up institutions, life still happens. Fur still gets shed. Chaos still sneaks in on silent paws. And as you walk past an old wooden bench now, its legs scratched just so you can't help but picture it. The dozens of meetings derailed. The notes battered off desks. The small rebellions that go unrecorded but not unnoticed. A government run by humans. Influenced by cats. Honestly, it explains a lot. You step into the bustling undercurrent of Westminster's corridors and find yourself trailing the perpetual hum of the press gallery. Outside the echoing halls of debate, a quieter kind of revolution pulses, one not of voices raised but of pages turned. Here, in the cluttered frenzy of journalists scribbling notes and snapping photos, the cats have become stars in their own right. They demand headlines, garner fan mail, and somehow outshine even the most grizzled members of Parliament. It all began when a well-known political correspondent, frustrated by the endless drone of policy minutiae, caught sight of a particularly charismatic Siamese perched atop a stack of documents. With fur like a well-combed suit and eyes that seemed to challenge the monotony of political jargon, the cat became known simply as Sundance. Reporters compared his languid stretch to a silent critique of endless debates. Soon enough, front-page headlines favored Sundance's perfect intervention over dull speeches from muddled MPs. The photos of Sundance languishing in sunlight now circulate faster than committee reports. You watch from a shadowed corner as a ragged reporter paces the press gallery, murmuring, "These cats have more personality than half the Parliament." It's a sentiment that echoes down the hallways where official minutes are as stale as the biscuits in the tea room. Every intercepted glance, every playful swish of a tail, has become fodder for the evening news. One paper even published a detailed exposé titled "Feline Faction: The Real Power Brokers in Westminster." Onlookers nod, and somewhere between the coffee breaks and deadline scrambles, you can almost imagine the cats sharing a confidential nod over the absurdity of it all. Between snippets of political scandal and the perennial debates over domestic policy, the press begins to lean in on another twist. Overhead, the buzz of typewriters and whispered telephone calls create a rhythm to which the cats, now unofficial celebrities, dance. A photo emerges of a calico cat named Miss Priss seated on a stack of financial reports, looking drolly out of place amid stacks of paper and government memos. The caption reads, "When fiscal austerity hits, who better to remind us to purr than Miss Priss?" Journalists huddle around, amused and perplexed, as one editorial declares that Miss Priss's nonchalant smirk is proof that, in Parliament, even the most dismal debate can be lightened with a little whimsy. Yet, the press gallery isn't only caught up in playful anecdotes. They delve into serious inquiry, too. A seasoned columnist pens a reflective piece on the transformation of the institution from a hardened, bureaucratic machine to a more humane and unexpectedly charming environment. In his analysis, he notes how the first official hires like Peter and Wilberforce acted as quiet symbols of reform during times when traditional power was too rigid to adapt. The cats, he writes, are emblematic of nature's own resistance to overregulation. Historians still argue whether such interpretations stretch the truth or truly capture a hidden facet of governance. Now, you overhear a lively debate in a corner of the gallery. Two journalists, one with a voice rich in dry wit and the other excitable beyond measure, argue over the merits of a new story angle. One insists that a feline-led investigation into ministerial affairs would break the monotony of political exposés. The other counters, at least, with a cat on the case, the boring speeches are now accompanied by adorable antics. Their banter, sharp and filled with inside jokes, each reference to a cat's fall from a desk or an epic sprint across a marble floor, mirrors the increasingly blurred lines between the serious and the surreal in contemporary news. In one unforgettable photo, a fluffy grey cat named Grayson is captured mid-leap as if interrupting a pivotal question in a live broadcast. The frame is so perfectly composed that even the most stoic officials are compelled to crack a smile. Grayson's image is reprinted on the front page with the headline, "Leap of Faith: How One Cat Redefined Political Engagement." Social media erupts with memes and hashtags, and suddenly, the pressing issues of state seem more bearable when seen through the soft lens of feline mischief. The imagery transcends political allegory, it's a respite, a shared joke in a world of relentless seriousness. Meanwhile, you wander through the gallery, noting how the journalists themselves have begun to adopt the cat-friendly ethos. A veteran reporter keeps a battered notebook full of cat sightings, categorizing them by behavior and location. "This one," he explains to a junior colleague, "is a classic case of the aloof diplomat. He never interferes, yet his presence speaks volumes." His colleague scribbles down notes, impressed by the uncanny parallel between feline indifference and political stoicism. Meanwhile, an editor on her phone ponders live tweeting the next sighting, adding playful commentary like, "Here comes Sir Whiskerton, breaking news on mice and by-elections." Within this melange of laughter and layered meanings, the cats offer more than superficial charm. They provide a meta-narrative, a personification of resistance against bureaucratic inertia. One particularly quirky piece of reportage details how a short-lived campaign by a group of staffers tried to have one of the cats elected as a non-voting member of a committee, arguing that at least, the cat listens without interrupting. Though the motion was eventually tabled and later dismissed as a joke, it leaves behind a lingering question. In a world where human decision-making is marred by endless politicking, could the simplicity of feline existence be the antidote? Across the room, you catch sight of a framed article pinned on the corkboard, From Paws to Politics, Why Feline Footprints Matter. It outlines various milestones: a cat's first purr documented on a budget memo, a scandal involving a cat's accidental nap on a crucial speech, and even a feature on a feline with a notorious habit of knocking over coffee cups during press conferences. Each snippet is layered with irony and a gentle reminder that even in the labyrinth of government, the unexpected and unplanned can create the most human of moments. As you take a moment to sip a lukewarm tea that tastes like it's been left to cool in the endless corridors of bureaucracy, you reflect on the profound influence these cats have garnered. Amid stifled chuckles, you see that their story is one that resonates with the tired, with the hopeful, and even with the cynical. Their silent, steady presence begins to underscore a shift, that the real power may lie not in the loud proclamations of elected officials, but in the understated rhythm of everyday life, punctuated by a well-timed purr or a mischievous glance. The press gallery, once a domain of mere reportage, now pulses with narratives of hope and humor. In a building that once echoed only with the sound of clashing ideologies, there is now a harmonious undercurrent, the gentle pouring of an unseen actor who has sidestepped the trappings of office. Whether gracing the pages of a scandal sheet or serving as the subject of a whimsical blog post, the cats remind everyone that sometimes, the most disruptive element in a rigid system is the one who never follows the rules. You leave the gallery with a sense of warm amusement. The legacy of these feline interludes is clear. Amid the clamor of political ambition, there exists an uncomplicated truth, an invitation to lighten up, if only for a moment. It's a reminder that life in Parliament isn't solely about grand debates and policy behind closed doors. It's about the small, soft moments that make the chaos worth enduring. You're strolling deeper now, following the echo of soft paws over polished stone, and the air changes. Less musty bureaucracy, more foreign spice. Velvet-lined corridors open into stately rooms where languages you don't speak once filled the air: French, Russian, Arabic. It's the diplomatic wing, the part of Westminster most visitors never even get to glance at. And yet, even here, among polished crests and stiff uniforms, the cats have made their mark. Diplomacy, you quickly realize, is not immune to whiskers. It starts innocently enough. You spot a tuxedo cat sprawled across a stack of embassy mail, looking as if he personally intends to veto every parcel. This, you soon learn, is Charlemagne, though he answers to no name. Beloved by some, suspected by others, Charlemagne is a feline fixture in the Foreign Office, known for his habit of silently inserting himself into tense meetings and curling up just inches from outstretched negotiating hands. One French envoy claimed the cat blinked in Morse code. A German attaché reportedly brought fresh salmon wrapped in linen to earn the creature's favor. Charlemagne accepted neither. He walked across a map of disputed territory during a strategy session, planted his entire body over Eastern Europe, and then proceeded to fall asleep. Interpret that however you like. Historians still argue whether the cat's behavior that day shifted tone between two particularly testy nations. At the very least, it softened tempers, hard to threaten sanctions with a purring diplomat on your lap. Soon, more foreign dignitaries take notice. An American ambassador becomes so enamored with a marmalade tabby named Clementine that he pens a letter to the president noting, while Parliament remains predictably indecisive, the cats here seem oddly purposeful. The quote leaks. The press loves it. Clementine becomes a celebrity across both sides of the Atlantic, and someone from the BBC tries to arrange an interview. But the curiosity doesn't stop at admiration. One Russian envoy, stoic, sharp-suited, unreadable, asks bluntly during a diplomatic luncheon whether he may borrow the ginger cat for morale. Everyone laughs. He does not. For a week afterward, Clementine vanishes. Rumors swirl. Was it espionage? A kidnapping? Or did she just find a particularly cozy radiator in the House of Commons? She reappears on the roof of the Canadian High Commission with half a pheasant and an attitude. The Russians deny everything, of course. Still, Clementine is quietly assigned an internal observation detail, which just means a board assistant is told to follow her with a notebook. The cats, it seems, have become diplomatic entities unto themselves. You pass an old security desk, now mostly used to hold various water bowls. There's a laminated sheet taped to the wall, Mouser locations, do not disturb during international sessions. Some names have been crossed out. Others added in careful penmanship. Beside one, someone scrawled often found sitting on the Algerian sofa, do not attempt removal. Apparently, they learned that the hard way. Beyond the jokes and gentle chaos, the cats become informal ambassadors, part comfort, part curiosity, part silent witness. In an environment where every sentence is double-checked, every glance politically loaded, a soft-nosed interloper offers a strange kind of freedom. There's no protocol for a cat. No playbook for how to negotiate when a tabby hops onto your lap mid-sentence. You either freeze in horror or scratch behind the ears, and that reaction, raw and unrehearsed, reveals more than any official document ever could. During one legendary meeting between two countries locked in a standoff over maritime access, which, let's be honest, mostly involved arguing over who insulted whose naval fleet more creatively, a cat named Bagel inserted himself onto the table. Bagel sat directly between the two delegations and began washing his behind with great determination. Tension evaporated. A Swedish ambassador snorted. A British official reportedly whispered, "At least someone is cleaning up around here." The meeting ended in cautious optimism and shared laughter, two things not usually associated with border disputes. Of course, there were missteps. You spot a little black and white photo nailed to a bulletin board behind an ornate door frame. Underneath it, someone scribbled, "Do not mention Cairo." The story behind it. A visiting Egyptian delegation once brought a gift, an ornamental gold cat statue, as a token of goodwill. One of Westminster's own mousers, perhaps misreading the room, urinated on it during the reception. Diplomatic apologies were issued. The cat was relocated for 3 weeks to non-public offices. Whether the Egyptians believed the act was symbolic or accidental remains unclear. Still, most foreign staff grew fond of the feline fixtures. Some embassies even tried to mimic the model. The Portuguese brought in a sleek tabby for their ambassadors' quarters. The Dutch recruited a rescue cat and named him Menja Snowit, Mr. Snout, who once escaped into Parliament and was found napping on a stack of immigration policy briefings. The entire building agreed that was oddly on brand. And you can't help but notice the frequency of cat diplomacy reports in the logs, entirely unofficial, of course. One file mentions that a particularly combative envoy softened considerably following repeated visits from Beatrice the Mouser, who sat on his coat for 3 days straight. Another memo speculates that the presence of a calico named Dottie led to a faster conclusion in a drawn-out fisheries negotiation, simply because nobody wanted to leave her unattended for long. There's even an anecdote about a Persian diplomat who insisted on bringing gifts for the Parliament cats, embroidered silk cushions, tiny golden bells, and a basket of cured sardines. You'd think the British government would turn that down. They didn't. The cats received a formal thank you card, stamped with the official crest. And perhaps most curiously, there's the rumor, still unconfirmed, that one mouse's movement patterns were used to predict which corridor an official was likely to pass through. Supposedly, this feline forecast helped time certain chance meetings in the hall. Whether the cat knew or just followed the scent of smoked fish remains up for debate. As you linger outside the diplomatic reception chamber, the clock ticking quietly above, you feel it again, the delicate, ever-unraveling dance between control and chaos. Cats, you realize, have always been the great neutral party. Loyal to no flag, swayed by no politics. And yet, deeply embedded in the very rhythm of diplomacy. Because what could be more British than letting international relations hinge on whether a ginger tomcat chooses to sit on your briefing papers or your rivals? You watch a junior diplomat pause mid-conversation, gently lift a dozing mouser off a velvet armchair, and place her onto a cushion. No fuss. No hesitation. Just part of the process now. And maybe, just maybe, the world turns a little smoother because of it. You drift past the corridors of diplomacy, lulled by the ticking of clocks and the distant clink of teacups, and arrive in a place few ever get to explore: Westminster's hidden infrastructure. The bones beneath the bustle. Here lie the mechanical rooms, archives, coal chutes turned wiring conduits, and maze-like basements that have kept Parliament standing upright for centuries. And, as you might expect, it's also prime cat territory. You descend a narrow, spiraling stairwell, ducking beneath ancient beams. The air smells of dust, oil, and history's leftovers. And almost immediately, you sense movement. A shadow darts just beyond your line of sight. Then another. The staff down here don't flinch anymore. That's just Minerva, someone mutters from behind a massive electrical panel. She's on her shift. Minerva isn't an official employee. Few of the basement cats are. They're part of an older system, one that predates payroll and personnel files. These are the feral-adjacent veterans, the cats of the crypts and cables. You glimpse her again, sleek, grey, ears flicked back, weaving confidently between rows of fuse boxes like she's patrolling her own queendom. And honestly, she is. The infrastructure cats live where no bureaucrat dares venture without a flashlight. They know the passageways, the heating tunnels, the unmarked maintenance doors. It's their Westminster beneath the Westminster. One filled with secret warmth and mouse-sized secrets. A facilities manager, older than most staircases, leans against a railing and tells you, "We've stopped trying to keep them out." Honestly, they do a better job guarding the wires than our security team does. You raise an eyebrow. He nods, gesturing toward a frayed corridor filled with delicate cables. They've saved us thousands in pest damage. Plus, the mice don't come near when Barney's on duty. Barney, as it turns out, is a stubber-legged tabby with a limp and a personality halfway between Winston Churchill and a construction foreman. You catch him mid-stride, inspecting the perimeter of the boiler room, eyes narrowed like he's about to write something up. When he finds a piece of insulation slightly out of place, he sniffs, circles it twice, then curls up right on top of it. Officially solved. Here, deep below the polished upper floors, the line between folklore and workplace protocol blurs. There's an old electrician who swears a cat once led him through a smoke-filled tunnel when the power failed. "I couldn't see my hand," he says. "But I heard paws. So I followed." True. Who knows? But there's now a small plaque on the wall reading, "In memory of Dusty, the unofficial safety officer." Dusty, it turns out, is stuffed and mounted in a local pub. Sort of. Long story. Historians still argue whether the widespread presence of cats in these maintenance zones was an intentional deployment or simply an organic adaptation. Some believe the infrastructure cats arose because Parliament's earliest designs unintentionally created ideal feline habitats, narrow spaces, warm pipes, food-rich vermin. Others suggest that certain staffers, frustrated by repeated rodent infestations, simply snuck in their own solutions and dared anyone to stop them. Regardless of origin, these cats form a kind of working-class nobility. They aren't photogenic like the press gallery darlings. They don't pose for postcards or charm foreign dignitaries. These cats earn their respect through sheer consistency. They show up. They patrol. They keep the lights on, figuratively and sometimes, quite literally, by ensuring no wire is chewed through in the dead of night. You follow a narrow service tunnel to the archives department, which smells like history caught in a raincoat. Here, Entire centuries sleep under dust cloths and creaky locks. The cats are everywhere. You see one perched on a stack of aged war correspondence. Another curled up on a crate labeled Coal Tar Legislation, 1873 to 1881. The archivists simply work around them. He's been on that crate for 4 hours, a researcher whispers, pointing. We think he likes Victorian civil engineering. The oddity isn't just tolerated. It's become part of the rhythm. There's a room beneath Committee Room 12 where temperature-sensitive documents are kept. It's always slightly too cold for comfort, and, for some reason, it's the favorite haunt of a fluffy white cat named Hush. She glides silently between shelves, sometimes pausing to stare into the middle distance like she's just seen a ghost of Disraeli muttering about parliamentary reform. One intern swears that whenever she hears strange creaking sounds or distant groaning pipes, Hush appears within minutes. Coincidence? Probably. Then again, maybe she's been keeping Parliament's oldest ghosts in check for decades. In this low-lit subterranean world, there's also the curious matter of feeding routines. Unlike the official mousers who get measured scoops of kibble and the occasional leftover sausage from the tea room, the infrastructure cats rely on a network of custodians and nighttime staff. Tins of sardines appear without explanation. A plastic bowl labeled "Do Not Move" is always full. And somewhere near the ventilation duct labeled "Chancellor's Spare Tunnel," someone leaves out exactly 6 anchovy crackers every Thursday. These rituals aren't written down. No one teaches them. New staff just learn. You overhear one cleaner explaining the system to a temp worker. That bowl is Beanie's. That corner's for Whiskers. If you move that milk saucer, the heating will start acting up again. Trust me. And he does trust him. Because down here, you don't question the cats. You adjust. Among these subterranean legends, one story repeats more than most: the tale of the clock cat. Allegedly, a slender black and white mouser named Nim would vanish for weeks, only to appear behind the face of Big Ben itself, casually stretching behind the numeral 6. No one knows how she got up there. One engineer insists she climbed through a forgotten ventilation shaft. Another swears she's part spirit. Either way, she kept the pigeons away. Westminster kept the legend alive. As you make your way back toward the main service stair, the cats begin to fade from view, blinking from pipework alcoves, curling under fuse boxes, slipping into archive shadows. It's as if they know when you've seen enough. You realize, in a way, that this hidden underbelly of Westminster, this humming, warm, slightly haunted world, wouldn't function without them. Not completely. Not properly. Not in the way that matters most. Because sometimes, the best infrastructure isn't pipes or panels or polished brass, it's the quiet presence of a creature who simply knows where to be. Who keeps the place from falling to bits. Who walks where others won't. You return to the surface just as the clock chimes once. The halls above are still busy with humans doing what humans do. But below, you've seen the real Parliament at work. You're back above ground now, but the air feels different, charged, like a kettle just before it whistles. It's the early 1940s, and Westminster is bracing itself against a war it cannot escape. The stone corridors echo with hurried footsteps and clipped voices. Papers flutter. Gas masks hang like forgotten decorations. And somewhere amid all the sandbags and blackout curtains are the cats. Because yes, even during the darkest years of the Second World War, the Parliament cats remained. You catch your first glimpse as an air raid siren wails in the distance. A tabby dashes under a bench, fur bristling, but not in panic, just in readiness. He's done this before. They all have. These are not your dainty, cushion-perched felines of peacetime. These are wartime cats, soot-dusted, battle-hardened, and mildly offended by the disruption to their dinner schedule. You duck into a bomb shelter tucked beneath Westminster Hall, its ceiling low, its smell a cocktail of damp stone, stale tea, and tinned sardines. There, huddled alongside MPs and civil servants, are the cats, some in laps, some curled into coat pockets, one proudly balanced on a ration box like he owns the Ministry of Supply. It's not just morale. It's maintenance. The bombing drove rodents deeper underground, where they chewed on wires, rifled through confidential scraps, and in one memorable case, shredded a speech Churchill had scribbled in pencil on the back of a whiskey menu. The cats rose to the challenge. One feline, a grizzled orange tom known only as Bertie, gained near-mythical status for single-pawedly clearing a section of Parliament's archive tunnels during the Blitz. No official commendation, of course, but someone did scrawl Bertram's Corner on a maintenance door in chalk, and the name's never been scrubbed off. Historians still argue whether cats like Bertie were intended to be kept during the war years, or simply remained because nobody had the heart or authority to remove them. After all, this was a time when everyone pitched in. The tea ladies knit bandages. The porters carried stretchers. The cats, well, they kept calm and carried on clawing. As bombs fell overhead and blackout drills punctuated the days, the cats adapted quickly. A mouser named Winnie took to sleeping on top of the wireless radio set, her body curled like a comma around the volume dial. Staffers began to believe she predicted the night's danger based on which direction her tail pointed. East. Prepare for noise. North. Probably a dud. Complete nonsense, of course, but comforting nonsense. And in wartime, that matters more than most people admit. You wander down to the crypt chapel, turned temporarily into a medical station. On the far wall, sandbags reach shoulder height. A young assistant nurse points toward a windowsill, where a smoky grey cat lounges with the serene detachment of a yoga instructor. "That's Miss M," she says. "We don't know where she came from, but she hasn't left since the first raid." The cat blinks slowly. She's not going anywhere. Miss M has, allegedly, spent time comforting the wounded. Some say she only lies beside the most critical cases. Others think she prefers whichever lap is warmest. Either way, she's become a fixture. When she sits on the bed, the nurse whispers, "The patients don't cry as much." Not all the stories are uplifting. One mouser, Tilly, a wiry thing with mismatched ears, was last seen during a blackout patrol through the Western Tunnel access. She never came back. No one knows what happened. Her little bed by the boiler was left untouched for weeks, then quietly cleared away. But every year after the war, an anonymous note appeared in the Parliament Lost and Found, for Tilly. Gone but not unfanged. Even in times of rations, the cats were rarely forgotten. Staff pooled their meat scraps, and a special budget line, disguised under building maintenance, ensured a steady supply of fish paste and liver mash. If anyone questioned it, they were met with blank stares and a polite "Would you like the mice back, sir?" You follow the corridor to the Prime Minister's office, then Churchill's wartime warren. He wasn't a cat person, necessarily, but he respected resilience. And when a white-pawed mouser named Figaro strutted in during a particularly tense war meeting and calmly curled up on a war map of the North Sea, Churchill supposedly muttered, "Well, at least someone has a plan." There's no official record, of course. But someone did sketch the moment on the back of a ration card, and it now hangs in a tucked-away hallway near the House of Lords. Figaro's tail clearly obscures Denmark. By now, the cats have become symbols. Not just pest control. Not even just companions. They're woven into the mythology of resistance, small, persistent, stubborn lives continuing despite the fear and the fire. You spot graffiti in a shelter stairwell, a crude doodle of a cat batting away a falling bomb, next to the words "You'll have to get through me first, Adolf." It's ridiculous. It's brave. It's utterly British. And, of course, it's entirely anonymous. In the rare quiet between sirens, the cats bring a kind of enforced normalcy. Papers still need filing. Lights still need checking. Tea still needs spilling. And a tabby still expects to be fed at exactly 7:30, regardless of whether London is currently exploding. After one particularly destructive night, Parliament's clock tower suffered superficial damage. A cat named Beans was found the next morning, sitting calmly on the western ledge, licking soot off his paw. No one knew how he'd gotten up there, or why. But his photo made it onto the front page of a local newspaper, with the caption, "Still watching the time." The cats survived the war with few official mentions. No medals, no monuments, no speeches. But in dusty corners and fading notebooks, their names appear. Beans. Miss M. Bertie. Figaro. Winnie. Tilly. Quiet sentinels with sharp claws and excellent timing. As you step outside into the ghostly quiet of post-raid London, the stone wet and the sky uncertain, a cat rubs against your ankle. Not looking for food. Not even checking your credentials. Just reminding you, this place is still theirs. And you understand, in that quiet way that doesn't need explaining, that sometimes the smallest, softest survivors are the ones who hold everything together. You're back in the House of Commons, nestled into the green leather benches, and something feels off. The room is tense, but not from politics. It's something else. A ripple of movement, like a collective shifting of coats, like a sneeze that never arrives. Then you see it. A black cat with a white chest saunters in like is expected. Not darting, not skulking, strutting. He paces directly across the chamber floor, tail high, gaze uninterested. A hush falls over the MPs. The debate pauses. The speaker glances down but says nothing. It's as if the cat has the floor, and frankly, you're not going to be the one to object. This is Marmalade, despite the misleading coloring. He's one of those cats who, despite having zero political affiliation, somehow commands more respect than most elected officials. He doesn't meow, he declares. And tonight, he's decided to inspect the parliamentary session. You lean back as Marmalade stops in front of the dispatch boxes. A tense debate over trade tariffs had been in full swing, but now, grown adults in tailored suits sit silently, watching a cat sniff a copy of the bill. And then, midway through Clause 3, Marmalade hops onto the speaker's dais. No one breathes. Then the speaker, unblinking, says softly, "Order," and also, "Hello, Marmalade." Someone chuckles. A few more follow. Tension diffused. Argument forgotten. Historians still argue whether incidents like these were encouraged by staff, or if the cats simply had an uncanny sense for comic timing. Either way, they happened often enough that Hansard, the official transcript of parliamentary proceedings, contains several polite footnotes about feline interruption. One member of parliament in the 1950s reportedly tried to introduce a motion banning cats from the chamber after one particularly long nap session atop a budget proposal. The motion failed. Dramatically. Some say it was the only time Parliament unanimously agreed on anything that year. You wander the side corridors and notice tiny signs, cat flaps, hand-painted plaques reading things like Whiskers staging area and fur-free zone. Good luck. They're unofficial, sure, but widely respected. One junior MP tells you she once stepped over a lounging cat and was silently glared at by 3 senior members until she apologized to it. Some say Marmalade was the inspiration for a dozen unofficial mascots. One was even painted into a political cartoon with a crown and a scepter, under the caption, "The only one truly in charge." There's a long-standing fringe theory, mostly shared at pub tables after long days, that certain votes pass or fail based on the cat's presence. If the feline remains in the chamber, the motion will likely succeed. If it exits midway through, failure is imminent. This is known as the Marmalade effect. Is there any proof? Not remotely. But one seasoned whip swears it's why they started bringing sardine packets to late-night debates. Just in case. You make your way to the committee rooms, where informal sessions and late-night discussions stretch well into the early hours. And, curled on a radiator in room 7, is Soot, a long-haired creature who once fell asleep on a pile of defense policy notes and left behind a small but crucial paw print that made it into the scanned archive. To this day, no one has dared redact it. Cats, it turns out, make frequent uninvited contributions. There's a long-standing joke in the Lords that any policy left unattended for more than 20 minutes has been revised by Whisker. One Earl once attempted to read a speech while his coat was still occupied by Lady Button, a petite calico who refused to move. The resulting speech was delivered with half the Parliament wondering if she would leap or nap. She napped. The bill passed. Coincidence? Probably. Amusing? Absolutely. There was also the memorable moment in the 1970s when a cat unknown, untagged, unnamed leapt onto the bench beside the Chancellor mid-budget announcement. The cat stared at the Chancellor, yawned, and promptly turned around to present its rear to the assembled press. The photograph made headlines. The actual budget news, not so much. But it's not all antics. The cats have a knack for softening the sting of human absurdity. During long debates, fraying tempers are smoothed by the simple act of a cat rubbing against a shoe or flopping dramatically in the middle of a heated hallway. They remind the people here, some of whom take themselves a little too seriously, that the universe does not, in fact, revolve around them. That no matter how vital a vote may seem, it's still subject to interruption by a cat who wants your chair. You duck into the Hansard archives and flip through the records. Indeed, some feline presences are footnoted, debate briefly paused due to animal disturbance, discussion resumed after removal of cat from table, and a personal favorite. Speaker acknowledges the presence of feline, no objection noted. One archived recording even captures a particularly testy MP loudly arguing a clause, only to be interrupted by a very distinct purring sound. The man paused, looked down, and said, "Well, someone approves, at least." By now, it's understood if a cat enters the chamber, you do not remove it. You adjust your argument, your volume, and possibly your entire emotional trajectory. Because the only thing more embarrassing than being wrong in Parliament is being hissed at while you're wrong in Parliament. You finish your loop and step into the viewing gallery above the Commons, where tourists sometimes peer in, expecting decorum and rhetoric. What they often witness instead is a quiet, unexpected moment, a cat curled up beside the speaker's foot, wholly undisturbed by politics. It's not chaos. It's coexistence. And really, if there's any better metaphor for a functioning government than a cat sleeping soundly amid disagreement, you haven't seen it yet. You slip through the back entrance of the Palace of Westminster one last time tonight, boots damp from a gentle London drizzle, heart a little heavier than usual. Something in the air feels like farewell. You're here to witness what few ever get to see, the retirement of a Parliament cat. Her name is Clementine, a blue-grey British shorthair with the unimpressed glare of a librarian and the grace of a ballerina who's just had enough. She's served through 3 prime ministers, 4 rodent surges, and more late-night tea spills than the canteen staff dare to count. But now, after more than a decade curled under warm desks and brushing past ministers' ankles, Clementine's time is up. Not that she knows or cares, really. You watch her perched on her favourite windowsill in Committee Room 9, surveying the River Thames like it's hers to command. She blinks slowly. Her retirement ceremony is about to begin, if such a thing can be said for a gathering that includes 3 MPs, a quietly weeping clerk, and a tray of salmon triangles someone smuggled in against catering protocol. There's no official send-off process, of course. Parliament doesn't technically recognise the cats as employees, not even the ones who've been around so long they know which lift is faster. But that's never stopped staff from organising something quiet and affectionate. One junior aide reads aloud from Clementine's unofficial service record, a handwritten page decorated with paw prints and marmalade stains. Notable accomplishments include successfully defended the Speaker's biscuit tin, 2019, and disrupted Budget Committee by standing on the photocopier and printing her own tale 16 times. The room chuckles. Even the grumpier MPs manage a small smile. It's oddly moving, this shared reverence for a creature who never once authored a bill, but somehow made everything feel less absurd. Historians still argue whether these retirements were an invention of the post-war period or if they've always happened quietly, behind closed doors, among people who understand that service comes in many forms. But if a cat's devotion is measured in paw prints and peaceful silences, then Clementine's record is flawless. You trail her down the corridors one last time as she takes her final stroll through Westminster. She moves slowly but confidently, pausing at each familiar spot, the bench near the Lord's Library where she once napped through a 3-hour debate on agricultural tariffs. The radiator in the House of Commons coatroom, where she demanded daily back scratches from every intern. The dark hallway by the clock tower stairs, where she once cornered a mouse and refused to move for 9 hours, earning her the unofficial title Defender of the Minutes. And then, quietly, ceremonially, she's carried out in a small wicker carrier, lined with the Parliament tartan, and driven off to her new home, the quiet countryside cottage of a retired Parliament librarian, who's promised to keep Clementine stocked with tuna, sunbeams, and complete silence during the 6 p.m. news. You're not crying. It's just the London fog, probably. But of course, not all cats got the grand farewell. Some simply vanished. They slipped out one evening and never returned, their usual chairs left empty, their bowls quietly put away. No grand exits, just fading footprints and a whisper of fur on a forgotten coat sleeve. Others passed on quietly in their sleep under desks, on window ledges, behind filing cabinets. When this happened, a hush would fall over the building, and someone, usually a clerk, sometimes a peer, would mutter something like, "He was a good cat," and then return to work with red eyes and fewer biscuits in their pocket. But a rare few were honored in subtle, stubborn ways. You pass by a corner in the archives labeled Mr. Tibbs' Nook, a space that now holds surplus envelopes, but once held a very round cat who liked to sit on the typewriter keys until someone gave him ham. A brass plaque, no bigger than a thumb, reads simply, "In service, always asleep." You peek outside into the garden where some of these cats were laid to rest. Yes, there's a real Parliament pet cemetery, hidden behind hedges and rhododendrons, known only to those who've served long enough to whisper its location. Tiny stones mark the spots. No dates, no flourishes, just names. One stone reads, "Tilly. Brave till the end." Another, "Beans. Timekeeper extraordinaire." And then, a little further in, "Winnie. Never once missed dinner." It's quiet here. Still. And not entirely sad. Because their legacy doesn't end in soil. Back inside, you notice the newest Parliament cat, a scruffy black and white kitten who's just appeared in the portcullis housebreak room. No one knows where she came from. No one's claimed her. But she's already been spotted chasing shadows in the lifts and refusing to let the janitor move her cushion. She's been dubbed Patch, though give it a few weeks and she'll earn something more regal, like her scratchiness. She's the future now. And it's a strange comfort, knowing that through the endless rise and fall of governments, through all the reshuffles, scandals, debates, and declarations, there will always be a cat. Not because they're needed, necessarily, but because they belong. And long after the last minister leaves, the last light dims, and the last page is turned in the history books, a tail will flick lazily in the silence, reminding everyone who's really in charge. You're almost at the end of this unlikely tale, padding softly now through the modern halls of Whitehall and Westminster. The air is cleaner, the lighting brighter, the carpets less scandal-stained. But guess what hasn't changed? The cats. They're still here. Still on patrol. Still employed, unofficially, sure, but with all the dignity and entitlement of lifelong bureaucrats. Some might argue they've only gotten better at this whole government gig. More cunning. More photogenic. Definitely more viral. You duck into 10, Downing Street, yes, the residence where the current chief mouser to the cabinet office, Larry, is curled in a sunbeam like he owns not just the flat but the whole kingdom. Which, let's face it, he sort of does. Larry's not just a cat. He's a civil servant, appointed in 2011 under David Cameron, and has outlasted more prime ministers than most secretaries. There's even a debate, half joking, half serious, about whether Larry should be allowed to form his own party. The Feline Independence Group, perhaps? He has press coverage, fan clubs, and his own, unofficial, naturally, social media account. But what really sets him apart is his sheer political longevity. He doesn't just survive, he thrives. As the Daily Telegraph once quipped, Larry's approval rating is higher than anyone he shares the building with. But Larry is far from alone. You cross over to the Foreign Office, where Palmerston once prowled the marble corridors, reportedly getting into territorial spats with Larry that led to entire diplomatic meetings being delayed. Staff quietly placed bets on who would win, while PR teams scrambled to downplay the cat fight. Historians still argue whether the furball standoff reflected actual interdepartmental rivalries, or was just very well-timed chaos. Further afield, you find Gladstone in the Treasury, a sleek black cat named after the Victorian Prime Minister, of course, who's known for curling up on financial reports like he's declaring a veto. And yes, even the Cabinet Office keeps a stash of kibble hidden in a filing drawer. Just in case the cats drop by. You'd think with modern pest control and sealed food storage, the whole concept of employed cats might have faded. But nope. These cats are here not just for function, but for form, too. Their presence softens hard offices, brings staff together, and yes, drives Twitter wild. Each one has an origin story. Each has their own quirks. Larry prefers chicken over tuna. Gladstone only drinks from one very specific mug. Evie, a part-time mouser who rotates between buildings, has a habit of standing exactly where you're about to sit. Somehow, the whole system has adapted. There are now spreadsheets for feeding schedules. Volunteer sign-up sheets. A small, mysterious cat incident clause tucked deep in the internal HR guidelines. One memo simply reads, "In the event of feline occupation of desks, staff are advised to wait. Do not remove the cat. The cat will move when ready." You pass a young intern who whispers, "Oh my gosh, it's Larry," like she spotted a celebrity. Which, in a way, she has. Not many civil servants get photographed more than foreign dignitaries. Or chase off pigeons in front of number 10 like it's their job, which, technically, it is. And yet, despite all this modern fame, the tradition remains surprisingly grounded. At night, when the building's empty and the hall's quiet, you might catch a glimpse of a tail disappearing around a corner. A silhouette in a window. A purring lull in the bureaucratic noise. These cats are more than mascots. They're continuity. Living, purring reminders that history doesn't just live in laws and ledgers, but in the small, quiet presences that remain unchanged. You think back to Clementine, to Marmalade, to the nameless cats who came before them. They're part of this strange, uniquely British legacy. Mice may come and go. Governments rise and collapse. But the cats endure. And every once in a while, when an MP drops a sandwich, or a minister needs 5 seconds of something real before a hearing, a whiskered face will appear, silent, impartial, possibly judging, and remind them all that they're just humans in suits. But the cats are eternal. As you settle deeper into your blanket and let the gentle hum of the night hold you, just breathe. Picture one of those Victorian corridors, dimly lit, lined with echoes, and at the end, A soft little purr, just audible above the shuffle of old papers. Maybe you see a flicker of a tail, or the flash of lamplit eyes. Maybe it's Clementine, or Marmalade, or even Larry on patrol. No loud debates. No deadlines. Just the gentle rhythm of padded feet and centuries of quiet watching. Let the memory of those stone halls fade now, dissolving into soft twilight and the flicker of gas lamps long gone out. Imagine the hush of Parliament at night, its arches echoing not with voices, but with dreams. And always, somewhere close by, a cat curled into sleep, the ultimate symbol of calm persistence. Let that calm spread over you now. No speeches to deliver. No votes to cast. Just the weight of your blanket, the hush of your room, and the long, slow breath of history curling up beside you. So close your eyes. Drift. And let the cats keep watch a while longer.